This podcast is made possible with the generous support of the Kentfields Foundation.
As we're warming our planet, with more heat in the atmosphere, it's evaporating more water. It's more thirsty and it's sucking up more water into the atmosphere. When it comes down, it's coming down in bigger buckets and bigger amounts. But on the counter side of that, it actually intensifies our droughts more rapidly. So it's that whole cycle at play that we're seeing. Do not underestimate the power of water.
You're listening to Watershed Matters with the Watershed Institute, where we talk about how climate change is reshaping New Jersey's waterways and what we can do about it together. I'm Lucia Middleton, Water Policy Associate at the Watershed Institute, and today we are kicking off our very first episode titled Why Water Matters. Now, before we get into the episode, I want you to think first about a water source that is local to you. Is it perhaps your kitchen tap? Is it a lake that you like to fish at? Or is it your nearby river that floods whenever a big storm hits? Here at the Watershed Institute, our mission is to keep water clean, safe, and healthy through conservation, advocacy, science, and education across New Jersey's waterways. Today, we're going to be talking about why that mission is more important than ever as we dive into climate change and how storms are surging and floods are intensifying right here in New Jersey. I'm joined here today by Jim Waltman, Executive Director at the Watershed Institute, and later we'll be talking with Bernadette Placky, Meteorologist at Climate Central. Jim, what does clean, safe, and healthy water mean to you?
You know, Lucia, there's nothing more important than clean water. It's critical to the health of our families, to our communities, and to our economies. Water is foundational. In fact, our bodies are 60% water. The reason that we call New Jersey the Garden State is the abundance of clean water we've had as a great kind of foundational natural resource. Sadly, tragically, we've kind of abused our water over the years. And so we have a legacy of contamination and building in places that we shouldn't have closer to the water. But the really good news is that the smart people working with the two of us at the Watershed Institute and our partners and in state and local government are identifying solutions to these problems. So it's an exciting time to be working at the Watershed Institute and in this field, working towards solutions that will protect, enhance, and restore this clean water that's so essential to everything.
And for the listeners that might not have heard of us before, what is the Watershed Institute and how would you characterize our mission?
So the Watershed Institute is a nonprofit environmental organization. We have a very strong focus on protecting water. We say trying to keep water clean, safe, and healthy. And we do that through a variety of strategies. So you and I work with a team of scientists who are monitoring our waterways, looking out for problems, and then trying to kind of figure out solutions to those. Policy experts who advocate for stronger protections at mostly the state and local level. We have this beautiful 1,000-acre almost nature reserve, and we have folks that manage that in a way that tries to set a model for others to follow. And then we have a wonderful education program teaching little kids, teenagers, and adults about the environmental issues and how they can get involved in addressing the problems and sustaining the water that sustains all of us.
So, Jim, you've been the executive director at the Watershed Institute for the past 20 years. Looking ahead to the next 20 to 25 years, what would you say are New Jersey's biggest challenges, environmental challenges?
So, Lucia, New Jersey is really on the front lines of climate change. So for us, that means more intense storms, more rainfall bursts, and that leads to more flooding. And flooding brings more pollution into our water bodies, things like harmful algal blooms, the pathogens that make water bodies dangerous for people, pets, and wildlife. We also have additional development, right? That's ongoing, and that means more surfaces like asphalt and concrete that are impervious to water. More water runs off, less water can infiltrate into the ground. The good news, though, is there's some brand new policy that the Murphy administration adopted that will help address the problem. So at least for new developments, so when we build new buildings, the developers are now going to be required to control the runoff from storms that are forecast to occur in the future at the end of the century, right?
That's
So
great.
we have to forecast what is the size of the rainfall, what's the width of our floodways along rivers, what's the height of the seas with sea level rise, and then we have to build to make sure that we're not building things that are going to be underwater in 50 years, and we're not building in a way that's going to make people downstream from us flooded out because of our building. So New Jersey is the first state to align our land use regulations with the realities of climate change. This was all done under a program called New Jersey Pact, Protecting Against Climate Threats. And it's a really important policy, one I'm proud of the work that the Watershed Institute did to implement.
Yes, programs like NJ Pact and NJ Real are doing really good work in ensuring that we have a more sustainable future for the state of New Jersey. And that is also why we created this podcast, to make a more accessible and direct way for the audience to talk about ways in which climate science, policy, and advocacy intersect, so that we can talk about more localized solutions that can build us towards a better future in the state of New Jersey.
To explore the science behind climate change, we're joined today by Bernadette Woods-Placky. She is a vice president for engagement and the chief meteorologist at Climate Central. Bernadette works across the country with community groups, also a lot of meteorologists, which is part of her background. She serves on numerous national scientific boards and councils and committees. She actually served on the board of the Watershed Institute between 2017 and 2023, I believe.
I think
right?
that's right.
And for a while, you were actually a TV meteorologist and won an Emmy Award. Is that right? Do I have that right?
This is right. That was the first half of my career,
Okay.
was the broadcasting on air. Now it's shifted over to supporting communication more broadly.
Right. So now you're really in the science of climate change. You're supporting this network. So let's just start out, strip it down. What's happening with climate and the weather patterns and our water in the state of New Jersey, but across the country and the globe for that matter?
I mean, to start from the biggest scale, as we're warming our planet, and most people know this, but it's really good to refresh the basics,
Yeah.
that we know we're warming the planet because of the greenhouse gases. It's the greenhouse effect. This is not challenge science. It goes back to the 1800s. We can measure the amount of greenhouse gases that are in the atmosphere, and we are burning more of those, and they're coming primarily from coal, oil, and gas. And so as we add more, it thickens that blanket around the planet. So it traps heat. Now, this plays out in many different ways. The most obvious is more heat. And when you add more heat, such as, think of a boiling pot of water, right? Things just start to bubble up. Things start to change. They get more unpredictable, a little less stable. So that's what we're doing to our planet. Now, the way that plays out with water specifically is it's supercharging the water cycle. And that plays out on both sides, right? With more heat in the atmosphere, it's evaporating more water. It's more thirsty, and it's sucking up more water into the atmosphere. When it comes down, it's coming down in bigger buckets and bigger amounts. But on the counter side of that, it actually intensifies our droughts more rapidly. So it's that whole cycle at play that we're seeing.
Right. And I think most of the state of New Jersey is in either a severe drought or a moderate drought. So we're talking a lot about flooding. We're talking about hotter summers. But as we tape this, I don't think the temperature has come above the freezing point in about 10 days. So what's going on with that? We hear people say, oh, there's no global warming. Look, it's cold outside.
Yeah, I think that also ties
Are you
to,
hearing that too?
Yeah. No, yeah. I think that also ties to the fact that a lot of people get confused about the difference between weather and climate. Like what people saying, the fact that if it's really cold, that must mean there's no climate change. So yeah, I guess could you just go briefly into what exactly is the difference between weather and climate? Because I think a lot of people conflate the two and get confused.
They do. So I'm going to put it this way. There's weather and climate. We'll get into that. But also, weather has been fundamentally changed because of our changing climate. So we're still going to get cold. We're always going to get cold. We're still going to get weather. What's happening is when you look out in time and space, we're just not getting as cold as we used to. And the reason this is such a big deal is because we haven't had a winter like this in some time.
Yeah,
This used to happen if you go back a couple of decades. And there's a lot of different ways you can look at the data on this. And we've done a few analyses at Climate Central. And you can go to climatecentral.org and find all of this data. One of them is the coldest cold temperature that we've had. It's creeping up. So yeah, it's still cold when it's in the single digits. No one is challenging that. But it used to happen more frequently. On top of that, it doesn't last as long. This is long compared to what we've seen in recent decades. And so it feels very different. Then you also look over time. When you look back at January for the country as a whole, we still had more record warm temperatures than record cold across the country, but we're not getting as much record cold anymore, and that's why it's news. So yes, it's cold. Still going to be cold in a warming world. It's just not as frequently, not usually as intense, and it doesn't last as long. So that's a little bit of what we're experiencing.
Thank you. Because, we're all hearing from the climate deniers in our lives that, hey, there's not a problem. We're back to where we
Well, the other thing we could get into a little, and we don't have to go too long about this, but there's some really interesting research, and I like to get sciencey sometime, of how a warming planet is affecting our weather patterns and the jet stream. And it gets into what we call Arctic amplification or the widening of the belt of drier air and winds around the equator. And it's all connected, and it's still active research, so it's still stuff that we're learning about. However, even when we do get these break-offs of cold air that are coming down here, the source region just isn't as cold as it used to be. So yes, it's cold. And when you're talking about the northern plains in the negatives, that's cold. But when you go back and look at the data from a couple of decades ago, that happened a lot more, and it was even colder.
I think we also wanted to touch a little bit more on as well how this differences in climate change, how it also relates to how it's been happening at the same time as overdevelopment. 60 years ago, we had colder winters, but we also had way less development. So how has our cycle of overdevelopment or just more increased rates of development, especially in New Jersey, how, from your perspective, has that accelerated what's been going on climate-wise?
So that's a great question. I mean, as far as temperature goes, it plays out more in these concentrated areas that have concrete, have pavement, where we've replaced what was natural land that could absorb water more or could absorb heat more or cool down at night, and it traps that heat more. So it often isn't as obvious during the winter months, but during the summer months with what we call urban heat islands, where we get these concentrations that spike a couple of extra degrees when there's no room for that air really to breathe, and then it doesn't cool off at night. So it's that overtime temperature that just doesn't drop as much as it used to. So that's one way. The other is water. And I know this is something the Watershed spends a lot of its focus on for really good reason, is when land is paved over, it just can't suck up the water that comes down. Right. And as we talked about with more intense rainfalls, even counter to the droughts, where does that water go, right?
Well, it's a double whammy too, because when you're covering the surface of the planet with these hardscapes, you're trapping, you're blocking the infiltration. So you can have more runoff, meaning more flooding, but at the same time be desiccating the groundwater because it can't get down there from the rainfall that used to recharge, as we put it, the aquifer. So we're really doing a number on the water cycle that we all learned about in 3rd and 4th grade.
And then you add more people that are pulling more water out of the ground. And here in New Jersey, but also other parts of the country that aren't usually at risk of running out of water, the groundwater that it's pulling is pretty extensive.
Yeah. Well, the good news is more and more people know about these problems. Groups like yours and many others are studying the problem and then communicating so well about it. So there's been a movement to particularly plant more trees in the cities. The Watershed Institute's really proud to be part of a collaborative that's planting thousands of trees in the city of Trenton, right? Which is making it cooler, at least locally, but also helping with this stormwater runoff, the flooding issues that we've talked about.
And they're trees.
And they're trees. We love
the
trees.
World so much better.
If we could do nothing else in our lives, right? Each of us could plant tens of thousands of trees. We'd all be a lot better off, and the planet would as well. So.
I wanted to know a little bit more about what you do with, I believe, Climate Matters under Climate Central, because obviously there's so much misinformation out there with climate change and climate patterns. So what are some specific imagery, metaphors, phrases that you use when you are communicating to people about climate change and perhaps water quality? Is there any specific graphics?
Sure. So there's a few different things we can get into here. First of all, Climate Central, more broadly, is a nonprofit researching and communicating on climate change, the facts, how it's affecting us, what we can do about that. We are non-policy, we are non-advocacy. And within our organization, there are several different core programs. One's our sea level rise work, which is done a lot with New Jersey. We also have an attribution science program, which gets deeper into specific weather. And the science has advanced to the point that we can now tease out the role of climate change within individual weather events. So we can see how much daily temperatures were influenced by climate change or not, or this cold spell, how less likely this is to happen in the future. And then there's Climate Matters, which is another one of our core programs, which really works with TV meteorologists and journalists in helping climate storytelling and reporting, and more broadly, climate communication. So what we do through that program is several different things. One is education. We do a lot of workshops, webinars, bring experts together in timely ways to help people understand what's going on, give a chance to ask their questions. Two is we produce regular content and data analysis, and we go local, and that is really critical. As we were talking about, it's a global issue, but you feel it locally. You react locally, and you will act locally. Sure. So that is really critical. So when we take a global issue or a hot day or a cold day, we'll do that analysis for 240 plus cities in the U.S. And all this data is free and open access on climatecentral.org, so you can find it.
That's so innovative, right? You're helping people that communicate for a living understand this critical issue and give them some tools on how to make it understandable to their listeners.
And it really evolved through the weather side, and that being my background is how I got pulled into it, because it is fundamentally changing the weather that we experience. Sure. And so it is part of the story, and it is part of the science and the facts. So when you get a big dome of high pressure, it's not just a dome of high pressure anymore. There's a reason we keep breaking record after record after record on the high side there. It's because we have more greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So it is a dome of high pressure in the weather pattern plus extra greenhouse gases from climate change. So it is more. So it's helping people understand that on the most basic level, but then how it plays out in daily lives too. In the sports that we play, how that's being affected, the beverages we drink. Some of our more popular ones are how it's affecting beer, coffee
and chocolate,
wine, chocolate.
So let's stop you right there. How's it affecting beer? I know our listeners want to know. Right?
Well, beer's not going away.
Okay, so that's good.
Full stop. Some of the key ingredients in beer, water, is a huge ingredient in beer. And depending on where the beer is made, right, or where that water is accessed, the quality, the quantity of it. Sure. Also hops. And hops is, as I've learned, a very finicky crop. And a vast majority of it is grown in the Pacific Northwest, east of the mountains in a dry zone. And so if it gets too hot, it tips it and they wilt. The other thing, too, is it is an irrigated crop that comes from snowpack. So when the snow is tipping more toward rain, there's not as much snowpack to melt off during those hotter summer months when it needs the water, so it can run out of water. And also, if the water changes when it comes and how it comes, that also affects the crop when it's grown, too. So all of those play into hops and water, which is I like a hoppy beer. Not everyone goes super hoppy, but
okay. So we can be concerned, but not despondent just yet. But yeah. And this issue with the snowpack, I know, is a huge problem, right? And so we used to have more snow here too, as we've talked about, and that used to gradually melt. So the hydrology of the region was a lot different than when you have a huge rainstorm and the water all washes out. So how's that playing out in the West right now, where we hear there's like record low snowpack in some places?
Yeah, well, we've been on the cold side.
Yeah.
They've been on the warm side and on the dry side. So when you have warm and dry, that is greatly affecting the snowpack. Now, different mountains experience it differently. So the Sierra usually get these big, massive dumps of snow or nothing at all. I mean, that's just sort of how it's always happened. And they have gotten a few rounds. When you have a warming climate, what we see is that the rain snow level tends to get a little bit higher. And so then you don't have as much snow usually overall, and then it melts off earlier and it's not there for the critical months for food and irrigation. And it also ups your wildfire risk. So that's that. And it has been on the warmer side also, and what's been experienced in this year. Now, the Rockies have been dry and really warm, and snowpack levels are really low. And this is going to be a major concern, especially when you get into the water issues that come from the Colorado River and then all of the states downstream that affects. And it can vary dramatically from year to year. And there have been some good years recently. This year is going to be a really tough year.
In New Jersey, we have been dealing with some droughts in the past 2 to 3 years, but overall we seem to be more so on the end of having excess water, and property owners have been increasingly dealing with just more issues with their runoff, perhaps with a flooded road, a flooded home. So I guess, honestly, I pose this question to the both of you. What are some ways that people in New Jersey can do to mitigate that risk of both flooding and decreasing that risk of runoff? Because obviously you can't completely eliminate that risk, but
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll have you
You wanna
start
take a
first because
stab?
you guys are doing some great stuff.
So there is a lot to be really upset about and concerned about and anxious about. And as Lucia, you've seen it too. Some of the towns that you've spent a lot of time working in Manville, have seen flood after flood.
yeah.
It's really dire. Several dozen people have lost their lives over the last
It's
just
very
this
upsetting.
decade alone in floods. But there is a lot of new thinking. There are a lot of smart people working on solutions, and part of that is trying to retrofit the environment that we have, and part of it is trying to strengthen the laws and policies so that the new construction that happens is done in a smarter way. So, and this can be done at the micro level. If you live in a home with a house and a downspout and some grass, make sure your downspout doesn't go to your driveway where it can rush down and cause flooding downstream, and make it go onto your yard. Better yet, you can plant a garden. The name for some of these is a rain garden, and it's designed to soak down have that rainwater soak into the earth as much as possible. Again, so we're both reducing the flooding that we're causing at our own homes and helping the infiltration, that recharge of our groundwater at the same time. The other thing, we really encourage people to get involved in environmental policy. I know, Lucia, you spent a lot of time on this. And there's some great news on that. So some of the state laws and regulations are getting smarter and tougher, particularly on new construction. So we're starting to require builders, instead of just looking at the current or even the past average weather storms, they're now required to look forward to the end of the century, what the scientists are forecasting for the amount of precipitation, the width and size of our floodplains, the level of our seas. So the Governor Murphy had this program called NJ Pact, Protecting Against Climate Threats. And the whole point of that was to align all of our land use regulations with the realities of climate change. Now, that's great, but unless the towns each implement it in a strong way that makes sense for the towns, it's not going to be worth anything. So we need everybody that cares and has some time on their hands to get involved, get to know your local town committee, go to meetings. Lucia and other staff, and I'm here to help teach you how to do that. We've got programs to do that. But so there's a lot of different ways, a lot of different things we can do. We can't all, we all got out of bed this morning, right? We have to be somewhat optimistic as environmentalists, or it'll be hard to move ourselves forward. But we have to find the things we can do and work together on those.
Yeah. Another thing I want to emphasize for our listeners back home is that what you were saying, where we're now trying to change the way that we develop in New Jersey. Back in the 1980s, even before that, infiltration was not emphasized. As Bernadette was saying, the water cycle's getting accelerated and cut off in a sense, so that all that water is rushing immediately towards your local waterway. So part of these new measures that we've been enacting in New Jersey is to promote and to reinstate that infiltration part of the water cycle. So you at home, things like a rain garden, as Jim was saying, even a rain barrel, which isn't infiltration, but helps take away some of that load off of your local waterway. Those are things that you can think about as you're thinking about how do I mitigate the risk of excess runoff and excess flooding on my property, is to reinstate that infiltration aspect of the water cycle at your own home.
We need like a fundamental shift in how we think about water too. I mean, stormwater, wastewater, these are things that in the past, the idea was, well, these are problems that we need to get rid of.
Mm-hmm.
We are so fortunate to have the amount of water that we do in this state, right? And for the most part, it's relatively clean. We need to see water as a real asset, a real resource, and protect it carefully and hold on to it, right? As in ways that you were describing. Yeah.
And two other things I'd add are coastal too. So
Sure.
we're a big coastal state, and we're talking a lot about interior flooding. Coastal flooding is a whole different beast.
Yes.
That we're struggling with in this state, and we are seeing some of the biggest rises in sea levels along our coast, and this is going to come at a steady state, but then get these extra surges around storms, and we often talk about them more collectively in the country when it's hurricanes or tropical system, but also nor'easters. Those are some of our worst here in New Jersey. And so we're seeing that push of water go higher and farther inland each time. And I know that there are things being implemented and raising houses, and that is expensive and complicated. And there's a lot banked in that, but we do know that these seas are going to keep rising. And even outside of storms, you can look at all the mapping, and there's a lot of different mapping from Climate Central to NOAA, and you can go online and you can play around with different sea level rises going forward in different years and see where that water is going to go to really see what your house is dealing with. And that is really important because it can empower you in making decisions that you need to make. And then remember, that's baseline. Add storms on top of it, and that's when we get these big pushes. And so that's another thing we have to think about.
That's crazy. My family goes to a town many summers for a week down in Cape May County, and there doesn't have to be a storm. If there's a full moon, the high tide, the water comes right up into the streets, right? So we're seeing what you're talking about in real time. I mean, I think we also need to be honest with ourselves that there's some places that we've built in the past, they're just not going to be safe or smart places to live. And the state of New Jersey does have a program called Blue Acres. It's a voluntary program, but they'll go in and buy out homes that are frequently flooded. And so the good part of that program, they actually pay at the value of the land before the storm. So these aren't people that are getting chased out with a worthless piece of property and no money to move. And then when they remove the home, they can restore the land's capacity to soak up water. So we're getting people out of harm's way, and we're adding the natural ability of the landscape, especially around our streams and rivers, to then mitigate the flooding downstream. So we just have to do a lot of things.
Too.
It's really hard, but if we don't accelerate that work, sadly, we're going to see more and more homes lost, businesses lost, and lives lost over time.
I do want to add a whole extra dimension that's not really about the land preparation and all of that, but personal safety in some of these moments too, because lives lost, right? So that's
tragic.
That's even outside of how we're building our houses and homes often. And I mean, Ida is a storm that I don't think any of us can really forget. It will stand with us probably forever. And that was a confluence of a lot of things. And I just encourage people to continue to be weather aware. And when it looks like it's going to be, so many people go to their apps, and this is nothing against apps, but there are limitations to what you're going to learn on your app. And if there's any indication, if it's more than a thunderstorm, which still can do incredible amounts of damage with the rain that we've seen in some of these bombs of thunderstorms lately. But if it is more, then go deeper. Take that personal responsibility and learn more about the storm, the timing, the risks, and do not underestimate the power of water. We all have this concept. I can drive through that road. I can do this. I've lived in many different states and done weather in many different states, and this is a constant challenge everywhere. And there is a phrase from the National Weather Service: turn around, don't drown. If you cannot see the bottom of that road, it only takes a couple of inches and your car can get lifted. And so do not mess with that water. Turn around, don't drown. Yes, it can be incredibly inconvenient, but
It's better than
inconvenience we can
passing
deal
away.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's life and death. It's life and death.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to touch on, what we were saying about how to mitigate your own flood risk, saving your own life in a flood. But another thing people can do is be citizen scientists. So not just mitigating, say, runoff flooding off their own property, but also participating in the science themselves. You don't have to have a science degree or have gotten your doctorate in science in order to do so. For example, we really depend on data from our volunteer monitoring program, Streamwatch. So I just wanted to know what are ways that people can get involved as a citizen scientist in their local weather, in their own town.
That's a great question. So first of all, Streamwatch, an amazing program. And the more you get involved, the more you learn, the more curious you become, the more empowered you are in making decisions, the more you can carry this to others too. And data is so important. Data is how we learn what's going on. It's how we can keep ourselves protected. It's how we can plan for the future. It's how we fact check our assumptions. So data is so critical, especially at a time when data and science are really being challenged. Now, as far as weather specifically, there's a range of different ways. And some are very simple. Get a weather station at your house. And it doesn't have to be connected to a broader network. It really doesn't. You can learn what's going on. You can report that out. We have ours at our house. It is not connected because it is not in the proper place for full calibration, and we didn't have that, and so I don't want to mess up data.
Yeah.
So I'm very aware of that. However, it's been really fun with the kids because we can constantly check the temperature. There was a long stretch without any rain, and kept looking at that. And my son even came up to me and said, "Mom, look, there was rain today." I said, "There was not." He went up and he poured water in.
Oh, jeez. Oh, you got one of those kids.
So again, I did not want to connect
Not
it up to the
manipulation
network.
of the results.
But if you do take it to the level of proper calibration, and there's a lot of ways you can find this information online, you can contact your local National Weather Service office. For most of us, it's Mount Holly, but there are some other offices that do affect parts of the state. And then you can get plugged into other networks. You can report to the National Weather Service. They love getting data and information. They love snowfall reports. They love rainfall reports. Also, there are other weather nets that exist in the world that you can get plugged into. There are school system ones that you can get plugged into. And there's something called CocoRAS.
Right.
And this is a great one to tie it back to water because this is how you get rainfall measurements. And this network has grown tremendously around the country.
Wow.
And you can check out a whole bunch of rainfall amounts from your own neighborhood, but also other parts of the country. And it's a real reliable network you can also connect with other people doing this and learn more from them too.
Yeah. So we're part of this Rutgers Network weather stations, and it's pretty slick here. And you can see that online. It's through the Rutgers website. I wish I could remember. I think it's weather.org or something very simple. But I think Rutgers too helps or coordinate the CocoRAS, which is more the citizen science thing. And so, one weather thing I think we've all experienced are these little microbursts. And, I'm here at work. We're in Hopewell Township. I live in the little town of Hopewell Borough. It's on the other side of what goes for a ridge in New Jersey. It's like 350 feet above sea level, right? It can be pouring here and not a drop of rain there, or vice versa, right? So, question, right, is that relatively new, or have we always seen those microbursts that are so site-specific? And I'd imagine that because weather can be so varied, that's another reason why it's important for more citizen scientists to be taking weather measurements at home.
So they have always happened.
Yeah. Okay.
they are getting more intense
But it's crazy,
in a
right?
changing
Yeah,
climate
yeah.
because, again, back to what we were talking about, the fundamental physics, we're adding more heat to our atmosphere so it can actually hold more moisture. So when it comes down in some version of a trigger, whether it's a thunderstorm, a tropical system, whatever it may be, it comes down with more rain. We are seeing that. All the data supports that. There's a lot of analysis on that. So we've always had them, but they're getting more intense. That's the thing. And this is where scattered showers, thunderstorms are wild because temperature is a more uniform variable, but rain is not.
Okay. And
especially when you get into these more turbulent driven type of events that are connected with thunderstorms, whatever, there was one, I think it was last summer or the summer before, they're running together a little bit now, where Pennington got 7 to 9 inches of rain, and I'm in Ewing, which for those who aren't aware, we're
next
right down the street.
Yeah.
And I think we got 3 inches to 4 inches. And that is so dramatically different.
Yeah.
No, I frequently drive out to the shore and it'll be like a 50-minute drive. And in that 50 minutes, I will experience like 3 separate weather events down the highway. I mean, it's just crazy.
But this is also when meteorologists say things like scattered showers. If you don't get it, it does not mean they were wrong.
Right. Right.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Good.
what scattered means.
It's not that the weather people are just scattered that day.
I don't know. I guess I thought like the rain would be like starting and stopping throughout the day, not that it was throughout different locations.
And here's another, get yourself educated, empower yourself too. If you're looking at a weather app and you see thunderstorm at 1, not at 2, thunderstorm at 3, not at 4, what that means is look at a radar. And look at where the showers and thunderstorms are and empower yourself to make decisions for yourself. I've seen this very frequently around, just for example, youth sports with my kids on a field. And people say, well, it's going to be dry at 2. But then I said, let's look at the radar because we're going to see scattered showers and thunderstorms on it. If it's not over us, we're fine. But if it is over us and it has lightning, then we've got an issue. So that's a way that you can just take it a next step. And instead of looking at just the hourlies, if it looks like there's activity, take it a step further. Look at a radar and see what's going on.
So I remember one year. So the Watershed Institute has this wonderful event called the Butterfly Festival every year, and it's typically first Saturday of August when the weather can be crazy. Yeah. And I remember we had one of those scattered thunderstorm kind of forecasts, and you were there, thankfully, and you were looking at your geeky little app, and you were able to tell me, and you said, Jim, I think we're going to be okay. And I was like, how is that possible? It looks like the sky's going to erupt. But you knew what you were talking about. We had a beautiful, not a drop of rain that day, if I remember right. So
I think a lot of people aren't aware that the information that they might have, like they'll see their road is flooding or they'll notice something about how the rain might come down and affect a certain part of their neighborhood. They might not be aware that their own town leaders might not be aware of that. So as you mentioned, reporting to your local weather stations about the different weather patterns that you might notice because they might not know, but that's definitely the same, very similar process for your local community leaders as well, where I think a lot of people think, oh, well, they know what's going on throughout all the town, but that's not necessarily true. Like you're the one who you live, you breathe in that town. You're the one who knows the best of the processes that are going on there, weather-wise, climate-wise.
That's a really, really good point, Lucia. And so I think we all have an obligation, right, to let our town leaders know when we see things like this. And maybe it's a storm drain that's running backwards, right? Could be a sewage pipe that's leaked into the storm water, and that becomes a problem. But don't assume that your town leaders or town staff know what's going on. So make sure you report and over-report incidents like that.
A lot of them are overwhelmed by other things on their docket. So going to your town leaders, making sure that you put this particular item, like, hey, down on Williams Street, this particular area is flooding, it gets dangerous. And then they know to deal with that and put that at the top of their to-do list.
And they're going to be grateful too. I mean, you're providing information about the town. It's their job to manage the town and protect the citizens of that town. And so, don't assume that you're going to be chastised by the mayor or the council member if you go up and speak to them about something that's going on.
This is a great point. Maybe you can tell them, since you are so in contact, what office should they call? Sometimes people don't know who to call. So this might be
Yes.
helpful.
Yes. So a lot of towns will have what's called an environmental commission. So some people will think, oh, you should report environmental issues or flooding issues to your environmental commission. When in reality, that's not the case. The environmental commission will advise your town government on decision making regarding environmental concerns, but they themselves cannot make a specific call. But I think one of the main offices that people can call in their towns is their council, the council members. Also, depending on the issue, the Department of Public Works as well, if it's a water quality issue. Now, once again, each town will operate a little bit differently. We do have 565 different municipalities in New Jersey, which is crazy. But yes, if you have a water pipe drainage issue, Department of Public Works. If you have a general, this road is not being maintained properly, this storm drain is clogged, this road is flooding, take it to your council. It'll be right on, each municipality has their own website. So you can look up, say, if you live in Hazlet, look up Hazlet Council, Mayor and Council. And those people's contact information should be posted on your own municipality's website. And from there, you can either give them a phone call or email them.
Well, and the other thing is that's just amazing. A lot of people don't understand that every town has its elected body. Sometimes it's called the committee, sometimes it's called the council.
Yes.
And they meet once or twice or sometimes more every single month. And when they have those meetings, you have a right to stand up and speak for up to 3 minutes, kind of about anything you want to, right?
Yes.
So there's always a part on the agenda, which is the public comment. So if you have a burning issue that you feel like is not getting enough attention, it's your right. Show up at those town meetings, grab that microphone during the public comment period, and speak your mind. Because again, you are helping the elected officials understand the issues that are within their town.
Yes. We all have a much more active role to play in this age of climate change than we think we do. And so there is hope. So I think my last question that I have for you, Bernadette, is what gives you hope in this face of climate change, specifically in New Jersey, for the people of New Jersey?
I always come back to people.
Yeah.
Hope to me is an action, and you choose to do it. And there are so many amazing people, including here at the Watershed and those that you work with, who are doing really good stuff and genuinely care. And so it's the people that always give me hope.
That's great. Bernadette, thanks so much for coming over
Yes,
today.
thank you.
Thanks for having
Welcome
me.
back home in a way.
It's wonderful.
And this is our very first episode of Watershed Matters. So it's great to have you as our first guest.
Well, it is an honor. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you,
Thanks so
everyone, for
much.
tuning in.
Thanks for tuning in.
That's it for our first episode of Watershed Matters with the Watershed Institute. Today, we learned more about climate resiliency and how you can take action to build a better and brighter future in the state of New Jersey with regards to climate change. To learn more, visit our website, thewatershed.org, and tune into future episodes of Watershed Matters on all available streaming platforms.